Chupacabra! Mire, chicos, it's a chupacabra. Chupacabra.
Some people say they have seen the chupacabra. After some tequila, he was dancing the lambada. We don't know where he has come from, making all the Mexicanos looking like a dum-dum. They say that he's a monkey. I think the whole story's just a little monkey.
There's a monkey-eyed creature that we call the chupacabra, 4 feet tall like a hidden chihuahua, in Mexico City, Puerto Rico, Nicaragua.
Hey,
Chupacabra.
Criatura que se llama chupacabra, es muy feo como el tibis barbaboa. Queremos pasar algunas palabras.
Hey,
Hey,
Chupacabra.
Chupacabra. Hi.
Back by popular demand, the Chupacabra intro has proven to be our most successful one. So take that as you will. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to whoever can hear the sound of my voice to this week's edition of the Squatchable podcast, where we talk about anything, it seems, except Bigfoot. Joining me as
And politics.
always, and politics.
Why, did something happen this week?
No, nothing to
All
see
right.
here.
Yeah.
Yeah, you two, always conniving behind my back. Right. Joining me as always from the sunny state of Washington, Power Breakdown.
Hello.
And from the Emerald Isle, Kevin.
What a bite, you mitt.
And from the undiscovered swamps of the Bayou, Chubbs.
Greetings to everyone.
I thought Chubbs discovered it.
Yeah, but like it adds a set of mystery.
Yeah,
Like,
Chubbs de Leon.
Yeah.
He searched.
No, let him sit in it. All right.
He found the fountain of youth in the swamp.
No, I'm trying to find the Rougarou.
Oh,
Chubbs de Leon. That's great.
Phil, don't encourage him.
But it was good. That was good.
It was not good.
It was great. I'm going to call him Chubbs de Leon from now on.
And if you enjoy Power Breakdown, the Dude Brothers, or Kevin, you may enjoy the badly drawn misadventures of two Bigfoot. Head on over to Facebook, Bigfooting with Keith and Colin, where this week, I don't know, something's going to happen.
I'm sorry.
I've just hit like a real bad spot in creativity where I can't think of anything. But
I haven't uploaded a video all week. Not one.
Necessity is the mother of all invention. And tomorrow, I'm sure necessity will give me some ideas. Anyway, without further ado, I am your host, Richard James Allen. There's been a change up in the topics tonight, as Niki was supposed to talk about McCamey Manor, but as you notice, she's not here. She's gone down with some kind of stomach bug. We wish her a speedy recovery. But instead of McCamey Manor, we will be talking about the Thylacine, because I was only given 20 minutes notice, and that's the one subject I feel pretty confident that I can do without having any sort of research. The first story is a horrific tale of true crime, conspiracy, and one, well, just it's awful. It's an awful story, and everyone should hear it at least once, because we have to make sure stuff like this does not happen. But I'll get ahead. So the story of Elise Lynn, quote, Lindy Chamberlain Creighton, and her husband, Michael Chamberlain. She was born, but it's mostly about the woman. She was born in New Zealand, moved to Australia with a family in 1969. Apparently, I've got mates in Australia, and apparently this was a bad time to be a Kiwi in Australia, because the Australians were actually quite racist against New Zealand, which was a new one to me. There was also the problem that she was a member of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and not a lot was known about it, and it was considered to be a crazy cult. So those two things going against her, which may explain what happened later in the story. Originally, they decided to live in Tasmania, Bonza, as they say in Australia. I plan to retire to Tasmania. I want to open a pub there. That's my dream. I doubt it's ever going to happen, but it's nice to have that what if. Then they moved to northern Queensland, and decided to take a vacation in the Northern Territory with their 4 children. They got 2 sons that were born first, and then their daughter Azaria, born in 1980, and her second child Kalia was born in 1982. So they went on holiday to Uluru, which is this big red mountain that for some reason is really dangerous, and it's like a sheer cliff. And for some reason, until the Aboriginals,
more commonly known as Ayers Rock.
Right.
Ayers
Yeah.
Rock.
If you've seen the movie, it would be referred to as Ayers Rock. Mount Uluru comes in a lot later.
Yeah. Uluru actually was the native word for the rock.
Right.
And I wrote a piece called Finding Uluru.
Anyway, it's this really dangerous sheer cliff, which for some reason nutcases decide to climb. The Aboriginals eventually put their foot down, and it was declared sacred land, and you can't go up it anymore. But
yeah, because people were taking craps on it
and falling to their death.
Well, yeah, but I wouldn't imagine that would bother too many Aboriginals.
On the night of the 17th of August, Chamberlain and her husband went to a campfire, leaving their children in a tent. They decided to have a few, I assume a few bevies with their mates. It is Australia after all. And so they sat down, they had some drinks with their friends, they chatted the night away, and they were cut off by a long, low scream, which could only have come from a child coming from the direction of their tent, and it was suddenly cut off. Chamberlain jumped to her feet, ran back to her tent, and reported seeing a dingo emerge with a shoe in its mouth. She then screamed, "Oh, my dingo took my baby," which is where that saying comes from. A massive search was organised. Azaria was not found, but the jumpsuit she had been wearing was discovered about a week later and 4 kilometers from the tent, blood-stained around the neck, indicating the probable death of Azaria. But the interesting thing was she was also wearing a matinee jacket, but that was not found at the time. From the day that Azaria went missing, Lindy and Michael Chamberlain told everyone, the truth, that a dingo had taken their child. A forensic investigation of the tent did turn up plenty of dingo fur, and it was, accepted, at least at the beginning, that a dingo took their baby. Early on in the case, the facts showed that 2 years before Azaria went missing, Mount Airy's Chief Ranger Derek Roth had been writing to the government urging a dingo cull and warning of imminent human tragedy. Roth noted the dingoes in the area were becoming increasingly aggressive, approaching and sometimes biting people. This was because people were feeding them. There were signs everywhere saying, "For the love of God, stop feeding the dingoes," but because people were people, they were feeding the dingoes, and dingoes were getting, very accustomed to human presence, and worse, were associating people with food, which is never really something you want a predator species to do. There's a reason you don't feed bears at Yellowstone Park, and the reason you don't jump into the sea covered in shark chum.
I don't know about that.
Sounds like a good day. Sounds like a good fun. So they maintained that a dingo had took their child, and they told everyone. Now, if you go back and watch Lindy Chamberlain's news interviews, they're available on YouTube. We know now that she was being stoic and brave, but she comes across as very cold and remorseless. If I'd watched it, I'd have been deeply suspicious, but now we know that she was being very brave because her child was most likely dead. On 29th of October 1982, the Northern Territory Supreme Court decided that instead of a dingo taking the baby, that the Chamberlains had instead murdered their child. and they were found guilty and sentenced. Lindy was sentenced to life without parole, and Michael was sentenced to 18 months suspended because they didn't believe he'd actually had anything to do with it. They just thought he was an accessory after the fact. So he went away for he had an 18-month suspended sentence. She went to prison for 3 years. Now, the reason for this was because everybody was racist against New Zealanders, or Kiwis, to coin the colloquial term. I reached out to someone, because I know someone in the NT that was actually alive when this whole thing happened, and she told me that it was because that they believed that the Seventh-day Adventist Church was a crazy cult, and because the police were very racist against Kiwis, and that's the reason that they were convicted. There's also, I found a Reddit thread saying it was believed that they'd sacrificed Azaria to a god, and another conspiracy theory is that the NT was very reliant on tourist dollars and were covering up the involvement of the dingoes to protect the tourism trade, which, everything except for the sacrificing to a god thing makes sense because.
No, there was one other thing though. I mean, this was also relevant to the Seventh-day Adventists, and they felt it was very similar to Jonestown, where the parents sacrificed their kids at Jonestown with Jimmy Jones, and they kind of just by the process of association, I guess, they just placed that all onto their heads.
It wasn't Jimmy Jones, right? Jimmy Jones is like the head of the Dallas Cowboys. What was the guy's name?
Jim Jones.
Jim, yeah, but not Jimmy Jones. He said
James
Jimmy
Jones.
if you want him. He might.
No, well, I'm just clear. I don't want to get any,
His parishioners called him Jimmy Jones.
Yeah, his close friends called him
okay.
Jimmy.
Well, I wanted to just make sure there.
By the way, one thing I saw, the girl's name going with the sacrifice thing, the girl's name could be translated to gift to God. And so people found many ways to connect to the sacrifice thing.
That was kind of made up. Yeah, but that was made up. Actually, the meaning of the name was like close to earth or something like that.
Yeah. I'm just saying they were reaching for anything with that.
Oh, sure they were.
Man. It sells papers,
We're interrupting the main story, though. I'm sorry.
That's right. I'm sorry.
Let's go back to listen to what good King Richard III had to say.
Right. So the reason they believed that the dingo fur turned up in the tent was because it was widely accepted that the Chamberlains had simulated a dingo attack to cover up the fact that they'd murdered their child. They had hidden Azaria's body and put dingo fur in the tent all the time, while at the same time sitting by a fire having a few drinks with their mates, and the other kids were totally fine. But, this was apparently accepted as fact. Lindy went to prison for the rest of her life, and Michael got an 18-month suspended sentence. We fast forward now 3 years. It's 3 years later. Lindy's been in prison this whole time. She's got a reputation for an absolute model prisoner. She helps out other prisoners with their appeals. She's basically a prison mom. Yeah, so she's a great model prisoner. She's which is nice because usually when child murderers go to prison, they get beaten up and stuff. And in this case, I'm glad that didn't happen. But in any other case, I'd be for that. So 3 years later, a man was climbing Mount Aries or Uluru, whichever interpretation you want to accept, and misstepped and fell to his death. You done? No? Are we going again? No? Okay, we're having fun. We're having a good laugh. Anyway, so this man falls to his death. 8 days later, the search party finally finds his body, specifically Camper Wallace Goodwin, who discovered the body of this man outside of a dingo lair. Now, amongst the next to the body, he found the remains of several animals, a signet, a nappy, and a matinee jacket covered in blood and ripped to pieces. So the court took this new evidence, investigated it. In February 7th, 1986, the discovery of Azaria's missing jacket supporting it in the Chamberlain's defense case. Chamberlain was released from prison and her life sentence was remitted by the Northern Territory government. That's not the same as a pardon or an acquittal. It's just they released her pending investigation, basically, what I understand. She wouldn't get her full pardon until, well, quite recently, 2012, I believe, was when, 2012 was when she got her full.
Yeah,
pardon.
It's an interesting case of how justice works in different countries. It's like that in Scotland. I don't know if you know that too, where there's actually 3 different things they can find you. Whenever they're having a trial, which is, guilty, not guilty, or not proven. And not proven means we still think you did it, but we can't use the evidence to prove it.
Yeah,
But you still go free. Yeah.
So, in 2012, she was finally given her full pardon. I'm not even sure her pardon, and she was given over $1 million in compensation. Which, it doesn't sound, considering it's 2012, that's 32 years. But remember, she only served 3 years in prison. She did not go back to prison after they remitted her sentence. She spent a long time fighting for her pardon. So she didn't do it. A dingo did it. A dingo literally ate her baby because of where she came from, because of what she believed. She was persecuted, thrown in prison right after her kid was died. And I think it's horrible miscarriage of justice. And I think that everybody should learn about it.
Yeah.
Well,
That's my
it's kind of a comedy of errors, if you want to put it that way. It was like a link in a chain that brought the court to the first decision, all the way from the court all the way down through the coroner and all that. But where it began with the 3 detectives that were investigating, I read an interesting account that the 3 of them had gathered after they had left the site, and there was out of the 3, there was one who, as already mentioned, seemed to think that she was cold and callous and so forth. Not mentioned by the other 2 detectives, but by this 3rd detective. And having worked the street, many years and in corrections, I can tell you that there are cases when you're talking about how old was the baby, 6 weeks or something.
Yeah, she was very, very young.
So we have a mother who violently lost her infant of 6 weeks. There are people who the tragedy is so grave. Obviously, there was a lot of people they'll tear their faces and cry and scream and whine and all this, but sometimes their systems will shut down to protect themselves. They will hide within themselves, way in the back of their mind, and not let it come out. They'll seem like they're functional.
Yeah.
And they'll talk to you normally, but it's like all the emotion is gone. And I think that's due to this this shutdown. Maybe I don't know. Maybe Kevin has seen that in some people.
Yeah, it's true. What happens is that depending on what culture you're brought up into, that makes a big difference. Where people think. I've seen people get notified of other people's deaths and the tragedy, and they just go sit down and they don't want to say any more about it. Not that they were involved in it, but that you have to notify somebody that somebody's dead. And that's it. They just put this, and especially that's sort of a British thing. And that too, Richard, there's that stiff upper lip thing. like any
Oh, yeah,
showing,
we're supposed to be,
yeah,
brave.
showing any emotion at that point in time is actually a weakness. You know what I mean? And that's oftentimes drilled into you. But I will say too, Phil, and I don't know if you just want me to comment on that as well, but there was I'm not familiar with um, the Northern Territories police system at that time. I will say that. So if I'm going off on a wild goose chase, and you used the word for the police force,
Well,
I,
I was just trying to bring up that
yeah,
one little point of
yeah,
how it could guide the
right,
opinion of the
yeah,
police who are investigating it. Because I
okay,
know that there are guys in law enforcement, once they've made up their minds, they're going to look for evidence to prove their
yeah.
point or to support what they think rather than the opposite.
Right. And I think, and it is one of the things, it was probably a very small police force. There was, at that time, and there was a huge scandal about policing in Australia in the late 80s about, it was kind of like a good old boys network. And that was in Victoria and New South Wales. But I can't believe that it wasn't sort of similar in this case, as in sometimes where, you thought somebody was guilty, and the term was you loaded them up. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
I mean, definitely you would think that leaving a baby and by itself in a park while you're going out drinking, like to me, that's where it all starts. You know what I
Right,
mean?
right, right,
Because
right.
I'm looking at it like, okay, well, it seems to me like you're neglecting a 6-week-old baby. I would almost at that point in time, like if 3 people were around discussing it, and one person had said, "I think she did it," you'd have to say, yeah, well, So was she ever, um, uh, she could have been accused of bad parenting, but does that stretch out into these other things? And
Well, there was
yeah.
someone else in the tent with.
Oh, there
with
was
There was
yes,
3 other kids with them.
yeah,
in the tent, and it just
No,
took the
2 other
yeah.
kids, sorry,
Oh,
with 1.
okay, all
and
right,
the campfire was not far from the ring of tents.
No.
So
right,
it wasn't. I don't think that it could have instantly have gone that way if they couldn't have found a murder, and murder wrapped a pin on her.
right,
But I just think that the evidence, some evidence, was simply being ignored as coincidental, and others were accepted.
yeah. So yeah, it was sort of a some sort of
And
a circumstantial thing is more.
well, you could look at these things a couple of different ways. Okay, for one thing, remember the warning about these dogs. Well, not dog. Well, what do they
No,
call them?
they are dogs. They
They
are
are dogs,
descended from dogs that
but
were introduced by the
about
Aboriginals.
these dogs coming around and becoming violent and so forth towards people, that was given well before this, and the fact that Mrs. Chamberlain, while visiting another couple, one of the other couple actually threw something to the dingo to eat.
Mhm,
And she
mhm.
scolded that person, saying, "Don't feed the dingo. You're not supposed to feed the dingo."
Um,
And but that could be turned around. That could be turned around. She knew that dingoes were going to be coming to people. That's why she planned it that way. And she stopped people from feeding the dingo because she wanted the dingo hungry. You know
oh,
what I mean?
she was in a conspiracy with the dingo.
It's like she knew the dingo would come around if it was hungry. Maybe she would, that kind of crap.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Well, it's I mean, there's no joy in it. But I mean, I will say that Mount Uluru, if you can get a chance to go and see it, it is a wonderful place. I mean, it's made out of sandstone. It's one huge piece of sandstone, and it really, the Aboriginal people think that's how they came to planet Earth on that rock. So
That's pretty true.
yeah,
But
so
yeah, my mate Deb, who, as I said, lived through this whole thing, was living in the area when this whole thing happened. She said that everybody pretty much just turned against the couple because of how the woman was acting on the police on the
yeah, well,
interviews, and because of how racist and corrupt the police were.
yeah,
I mean, it was pretty much, people on the jury were saying things like, "Oh, we're gonna get the bitch and we're gonna put her in jail."
Right.
So it's just she had a trial by jury, and so she was done for. If
Yeah.
I'd have been on that jury and she'd spoken the way she did to the newscast, I would have thought she was guilty as well, because it is creepy. I mean, now you know that she was just being stoic and brave, but it was creepy.
Damn near automatic,
and damn near automatic.
Automatic. It was like she was on some kind of cruise control, and it wasn't
Like,
obviously it wasn't until later that it may have hit her.
Yeah, and it is one of those things. The closest town away is like 200-300 miles away. It's Alice Springs, and this is out in the middle. It's out in the middle of nowhere. It's almost in the center of Australia if you look at a map.
Yeah,
and there's nothing around. And Alice Springs is not a big town, and
Crocodile Dundee. He's from Alice Springs.
Yeah, and the thing that I would say about that is, coming from a small town and everything like that, or a village or whatever, and if it would have been, she's not even from around here, man. What you know what I mean?
I know. Yeah,
it's just I'm not. That's all I'm going to say about that.
The bias existed at many different levels, from the police to the medical examiner to the jury. To the court, maybe even her own damn attorney.
Yeah.
Everyone thought she was guilty.
Yeah.
And you just know that Dingo was sitting in that courtroom chuckling to himself. The bastard. Chubbs, what do you think of all this?
Well, I can say that I remember growing up and watching the whole phrase "Dingo took my baby" go from something that actually happened to almost what we would call a meme these days, because it's been in they showed one of the things I was watching, like Seinfeld used it. It was in movies. Yeah, and I watched it become a joke. But all the stuff y'all said, if you look it up, there's a million things about the court stuff. But in the end, I'd like to tell people to take away from it, like, these things can happen. It's really not a joke. Like wild animal stories, these things do happen. And that's the saddest part to me, is like, what happened with the people. That's one thing. Cause I did see one thing where they said the lady in court, like, she would laugh sometimes and people said, oh, she's heartless, or she cry. And then they'd say she's making it up. So she couldn't win for losing in that sense. But, in reality, a dingo can, animals could do that. And that's the saddest part about it is,
Right.
we need to respect the wilderness. And like y'all said, they were in the middle of nowhere. But even, we think of dogs as, a man's best friend. But from the wild dogs with the big ears to the dingoes, like, this can happen. So I think we should take away that safety first. It can happen. So
yeah. Well, my question for people in America is that, if you went out camping and this tragedy happened and somebody said a wolf took it, my kid, would how would we would think it was a tragedy? You know what I mean? We wouldn't make a joke about it. I mean, and so, and there's lots of people that claim Bigfoot took their kid or whatever, obviously, there is something more to it. Obviously, I think in cases like that, and I don't know, Phil, because I've never done this kind of thing, but isn't it sort of statistically proven that if a baby dies or a spouse dies or something like that, that it's usually somebody within the family, and that
yes,
that you would almost have to think that's what they thought, whereas the evidence that was providing any different thing was. It wasn't.
It's kind of a. I'm not going to say it's a hard nut to crack, because it really isn't. I mean, there's a perception, which is on one thing, but even as an officer, you're at least where I attended the academy and continual training, it's pretty much beaten into you that you collect the evidence, and that's what you're there to do. You're there to collect the statements. You're there to examine the scene, to take photographs, measurements if necessary, collect any evidence that might be around for whatever it is, DNA, fingerprints, or whatever, and you put that all in one nice bundle. You set it off to the district attorney. And your reports do not reflect anything personal or opinionated or anything of that nature. It's all nuts and bolts. It's all evidence, and it's just the facts as you have seen them. And my personal feelings have never entered into it unless I have somebody in an interrogation room. That's where that comes into play.
Yeah.
But other than that, no. It's follow the evidence, not your gut.
Yeah, but I think I mean, it's one of those things that people do need to realize too, that if something like that happens within your family, you're probably going to be questioned. You know what I mean? At least initially about what happened, and and somebody might get a little aggressive with you about it. But but the thing about it is, you have to be a little bit distant from it, and just be yourself. I mean, don't try to put on whatever it is for somebody else, because like I said, if you're trying to be stoic like that or whatever, that can I mean, it's a visual cue. I mean, you know what I mean? People actually receive body language more than they receive what you're saying.
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
and you can tell when someone's nervous. Just by what they're doing.
Right. I mean, that's really all I wanted to say about that. But I mean, it's a tragedy. We do. It's a good thing whenever people get out of these things. It's a good thing whenever they find a little bit of peace in their life.
The thing about this also was, I was a police officer about the same time, and and just how much of a correlation there is between the two stories, between this one with the Chamberlains and the story with Elizabeth Dion Downs, who shot her 3 kids in the back of her car.
Right.
And I remember the dragnet that was put out on that woman. I still have the wanted poster. It's interesting. But yeah, she was definitely a sociopath. And even from the get-go, from the things that didn't add up in the original statements and everything, the investigators weren't just suspicious. They were getting these clues from her that she really didn't give a crap about these kids. And it wasn't she was putting up some kind of a brave thing or asking about the 2 children that have been shot that survived or anything. I mean, she didn't even ask about them. Like, how are they doing? And I want to see my son, and I want to see my other daughter. That none of that ever came into play with this woman. And she was convicted. She did shoot these 3 kids. And, yeah, and it's really hard. It's really hard to accept that a mother would do that. But this woman was very much into sexual liaisons, and she let that rule her life, basically. Long story.
Can we change the next subject to somebody tell a joke or something?
Yeah.
I know.
We're moving on now. Okay, so take a moment now to talk about Planet Fear, Matt Knapp's new podcast. His latest episode featured Bob Dominguez, and it was really entertaining. It's all available on all podcast platforms. That last tale was a bit harrowing.
It was a sad thing about Bob Dominguez too. There's this old story that it's kind of sad. I don't know. I'm just kidding.
But
I'm sorry.
But another thing we can blame dingoes for, or possibly dingoes, because opinion is divided.
Chupacabras. That's what they're. Yeah. That's where they came from.
Opinion is divided on the subject. Is the extinction of our next topic on the Australian mainland. We stay in Australia for our next subject. We are going to talk about the Tasmanian tiger or Tasmanian wolf or the thylacine or Thylacinus psilocephalus. That's
The,
right,
the
bitches.
Australian chupacabra.
I know its Latin name. Now, if you want to blame something for my blog, my podcasts, my time on the 14 slip, all my influence in the Bigfoot community, you can place the blame solely at the feet of this animal, because this is what drew me into cryptozoology. This is the thing that hooked me into this subject and eventually Bigfoot land, the thylacine. When I was a kid, I watched an Australian, one of them Australian shows
Travel
for
films.
kids. No, it wasn't a travel film. It was a show for kids. It was about kids getting into trouble.
Ooh.
And on one episode, they
Was it
went,
Skippy? Was it Skippy?
no, it wasn't Skippy, the bloody bush kangaroo.
Okay, well, I'm just saying.
I'm just, yeah, you know, that kid was obviously schizophrenic. There's no such thing as a bloody talking kangaroo. Someone needed to help him. All
His
right.
name, yes, it was. His name was Zorth.
Anyway, they went looking for the Tasmanian tiger, and I wondered what that was because I'd never heard of it before. There's tigers in Tasmania, I thought. I went and got a nature book and looked it up. Well, there were tigers in Tasmania, suffice to say. They're all gone now, long extinct. The last wild one was shot in 1933. A live one was captured in 1930, and the last domesticated, well, I guess imprisoned one, died at Humboldt Zoo in 1936. It is a cryptid, however, as sighting reports continue to come in across Australia and Tasmania. Now, the thylacine opinion is divided on when it was first discovered. Some people say that the first official accounting of it was in 1642, when a naturalist reported finding footprints of a large animal with claws like a tiger. Or perhaps it was discovered in 1772, when a naturalist reported seeing a tiger cat. However, spotted quolls look pretty similar to that description, so it's entirely likely they were reporting quolls. But the first official, 100% accounting of the thylacine happened in 1801, when a naturalist captured one and sent the taxidermy to London Natural History Museum. So that is the first official one. Now, they were originally spread out across all of Australia and Tasmania. They went extinct on the Australian mainland. Well, again, supposedly went extinct on the Australian. Piss off, Dean.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. What was the name of the first one from the 16th century? Was that? Well, I think I know his name. Say it with me, Phil. Chubbs de Leon.
Chubbs de Leon.
He was the first.
I really dislike you intensely right now. Anyway, oh god, I've been thrown off my groove now. Right, yeah. So the Australian mainland, 2,000 years ago, the thylacine went extinct. Now, opinion is again divided on why this is. Some people blame the introduction of the dingo. Mammals have historically always been able to outcompete marsupials in pretty much all respects. But since dingoes are mostly, day hunters, they hunt during the day, and thylacine were thought to be nocturnal, opinion is divided on whether or not the dingoes contributed to this because they weren't hunting at the same point. Yes, Dean, you finally won. So some people blame the encroachment of man on the extinction of the thylacine.
Encroachment of man. Yeah, you got to put Dean's last comment right up there on the screen for everybody.
Maybe I don't want to.
Encroachment of man. Some people blame the rapid shift in the climate. Whatever reason, thylacine were thought to go extinct on the Australian mainland 2,000 years ago. But there are reliable accounts of thylacines in southern Australia in the 1830s, and indeed it's believed that a small pocket hangs on today. We also have the fact that in a desperate bid to save the Tasmanian wildlife, several species of Tasmanian wildlife were released on the Australian mainland. This is written down. It's from government reports in the early 1900s. Now, there's no written down that thylacine were reported to be released, but if you were going to release an animal is a threat to farmers, you're not going to tell anyone about it. It's the logic there. So it's possible some were released then. It's also possible none were released.
The lack of evidence becomes evidence.
Yeah, well, that's what I was getting to. But there's also a case to be made that is all complete bullshit and no thylacine were ever released.
Oh, thank you. I knew you're going there.
I was going there, Phil. You gotta let me.
I'm sorry, I jumped ahead.
Yeah, but there are reliable accounts of thylacine in the 1830s in southern Australia. That being said, well, what do we know about the thylacine? Well, not very much, sadly. Nobody bothered to research it before its extinction, so we just know that it was pretty shy and it was nocturnal. It's also said by old trappers that thylacines never went over anything if they could go under it. So take of that as you will. So what led to its extinction? Well, mankind, of course. It was deemed to be a nuisance animal, and a bounty was placed on its head.
No, it was global warming.
It was not global warming. Bounty was put in its head, and it was hunted to extinction. There was also a virus in the early 1900s that swept through the Tassie devil population and spotted koala and possibly the thylacines that caused a lot of stillbirths, so that contributed. But the main reason the thylacine has gone extinct is because we hunted it out, which is kind of sad. We've done that to many species: the great auk, the moa birds, the elephant bird, the dodo.
Well, how dangerous was the thylacine? I mean, was there any reports of the thylacine?
We don't know. That's what annoyed me. Everyone says it's a nuisance animal, but all I can find out about it was it would occasionally eat chickens and sheep.
Yeah.
Oh my God!
It was more akin to like a fox, I think. The same way that people think foxes are a nuisance. You know what I mean? That they come and do that also. But it is interesting. So you're saying that? I mean, it's see, a lot of people think that they are like dogs or cats or something like that, but they couldn't actually crossbreed with anything else. I mean, could they?
They were marsupials.
Yeah. So like that, and that's the case with koala bears too now that are almost gone or getting to a lower population, that they, like you said, they do have a virus. I think it's like a strain of chlamydia or something like that, where it makes them sterile, and that's one of the problems that
kill them.
What?
Kill them.
Well, I mean, we're not killing koala bears. They're adorable.
Oh, okay, all right.
No.
If we've wasted billions on pandas, we can spend it keeping koalas.
No, I'm thinking though, the story begins at the point, and I'm not a geologist, so I don't know exactly what era this happened, but the separation of the two landmasses, the Australian continent pulled away from the European continent, and at that point, all kinds of animals developed on the Australian continent, and that's why these things have come to be without being somewhere else. So, for someone to say that the thylacine is some kind of a myth or whatever, we've got photographs of it, blah blah blah, and it just seems like it's pretty remarkable. I wouldn't even classify it as a tiger since it developed completely separate of what we know as a tiger.
Right. It just looks like it. And it is a funny thing to realize that, when you look at Australia and you look from, the into, like Papua New Guinea and then to the Asian continent itself, there is a line that goes through those islands that basically stops, the current pool stops anything from trying to get to, Australia from Asia. So it is definitely cut off.
Yeah.
And it's a weird thing. I don't know what area, what time it was that it happened, but
they're obviously there long before we were.
Yeah. And you do get strange sightings of stuff in Australia itself. I mean, obviously, people still believe in the
weird blood cryptids in Australia.
Yeah, like the Yowie.
Dinosaurs. There's Bigfoot.
Yeah.
There's giant spiders. Oh man, it's a weird place to be a cryptozoologist. But why is the thylacine a cryptid at all? I
It
hear you
shouldn't
ask.
be.
Well, no,
Yeah.
it's not.
Because it clearly existed. There's nothing unknown. Cryptozoology is the study of unknown or unclassified animals. It's not unknown. We know all about it. Well, because even though it was classified as extinct, people think it's still around, and that's how it sort of eked its way into cryptid status.
So
Now,
when was the last video or something claimed to have been shot of this thing?
It wasn't
the
that
last,
long ago,
the
I thought,
last,
or
the
sighting at
last
least.
actual video came from 1936 in Humboldt Zoo, and but there have been videos of supposed thylacines, in the same vein as Bigfoot, including a very, very interesting video taken in Victoria in the 1960s, which I swear blind is a thylacine.
That's kind of a hard thing to fake in the 1960s.
Mhm.
Yeah, I swear blind that this animal is a thylacine. I'll see if I can find it and put it on the YouTube. I'm completely unprepared. We were supposed to be doing something else.
Oh no, but I think that the thing that's always interesting to me is because they were nocturnal, because they were notoriously shy, because they seem to be masters of sort of camouflage, and people are not thinking. I mean, people look at Australia and think, okay, this is like, it's desert. Well, it is desert part of it, but it's not all. And so a lot of the habitat that they would live in would have lots of natural cover. It's almost like a jungle. And so, to think that they couldn't hide out there. I mean, how do you come up with this idea that something's extinct anyway? Because you just don't see them all. I mean, like it's
In
not like
order for an animal to be classified as officially extinct, no living specimen can be discovered for 50 years.
for 50 years.
50 years.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that it's not. That doesn't mean that it is extinct,
But
though.
that's the
Yeah, I
official.
mean, well, I get it, but I mean, a lot of times people say, I thought it meant that there was less than a certain amount of, viable things left or whatever. But I mean, like I said, if you're talking about something that, I mean, it's like here in a way where you think, okay, well, America's all been discovered. Well, yeah, America's all mapped out, but there's places in America I bet you nobody's been. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And so it's very hard to say that something's gone. I mean, it's not like Ireland, right? It's not like I'm going to say yeah, there's something over there, that you couldn't sort of find. But I mean, this is a huge place. Even Tasmania itself, I don't think there's that many people that live there. It's not like it's all cut down and it's coming into your allotment or your neighborhood or something. So I don't know. It's a funny thing. I think that if anything, they figured out how to stay away from people.
Right now, they're neighborhoods. Soon they'll become allotments.
It was the 1970s. I got that one wrong. But
Oh.
this is the footage. I swear blind that this is a thylacine.
No, it's not a dog.
No, it's not a dog. It's not a fox.
Too
Or
big for a
were
fox.
they taking it out of a car? Was
Yeah.
that out of a car window?
Yeah.
How can they? Okay, let me ask you this question: how can they hold that from a car more stable than the Patterson?
Well, it's been stabilized after the fact. You can see
Oh,
it.
was that?
Stabilized
Okay.
footage.
All right. Okay.
You can see because of the black thing around the edge.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't catch that first. I was hyper focusing on the thing itself.
But yeah, I swear blind that that's a thylacine. I could be wrong, but this was taken in 1973 near Victoria.
Yeah.
The only thing it could be is a mangy fox.
That's too big. That's too big for a fox.
Yeah.
Well, you've got it. I mean, it doesn't move like anything. I mean, it looks like it's almost moves like the two front legs go and then the two back legs go.
Yeah,
and
the
the tail
is rigid.
The tail is
absolutely
completely
rigid,
different than
like a marsupial.
The muzzle does not look like a dog.
The ears back. It looks like a kangaroo in this frame.
Yeah, the head portion of it looks more kangarooish.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, look at that gait. You can see that long, straight face. I swear blind, that's a thylacine. I mean,
I would
you can all. It might be pareidolia, but I swear you can see stripes.
Yeah, right there, right just before that point.
Yeah,
If you back it up a little bit and play it,
yeah. See, right there. I
Mhm.
might. That looks like stripes.
even
on me.
beyond the tree, go just beyond the tree. There, right there.
Yeah, look, you can see this. I swear blind, that's a thylacine, and that was in '73.
That's a
But
Super 8 film.
mm, but yeah, oh yeah, definitely there. Look at that.
You can see the separation where the stripes are, and then the dark
That's
part.
not pareidolia. Yeah, so I swear blind that this is an actual living thylacine in Victoria in 1973. You got trees and cars in the background for size reference.
You look at the midsection also. The thylacine has a large rib cage area. Then it gets real
Yeah.
narrow, kind of like a greyhound would look. And this has that same kind of a thing, but obviously this isn't a greyhound.
No.
No.
And this was in '73, and the last known one died in 1933. The last wild one was shot in 1933. So that to me, and there's lots of other videos. There's nothing definitive about them. That's my thing. This one to me, because you can pause it like there, it looks like a kangaroo. The tail's rigid, and you can see stripes there. I say, absolute. I'd go all in.
Well, the evidence isn't all in, but I would say that there's a distinct probability that it is.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. If I sent you like the actual video, would you do a breakdown?
Well, shit, yeah.
All right, then. I'll find that for you because this is part of a montage. But now I know the actual thing, I'll be able to find it. So yeah, Chubbs, what do you think?
Well, I think the fascination kind of comes from a couple things. One, it's something we know existed. It's not, something coming from myth like a lot of cryptids. And the beauty of it that you have kind of an amalgam of like it's not too big, it's almost like a dog, but it's not too small, and it has the beautiful stripes on it. And I think because of its size, it very well could be anywhere. Like, it could hide as much as it wants to. And Australia is a very big place. So, I see no reason it couldn't be around. And I think it's the beautiful stripes, and it had a very big mouth, right? Like the mouth is extraordinarily
Could
big.
unhinge its mouth like a snake.
Right. I remember there was something about the mouth. So I always enjoyed it because, yeah, it did exist. We know that. And
What do you think of the video?
I think what y'all have said is correct. I think it's a little too fuzzy to say for sure
Yeah,
because
obviously.
the film's old,
Yeah, obviously you can't say for 100%, but of all the videos, supposed videos of the thylacine I've ever seen, that one is the most compelling.
Yes, I agree.
Well, I think that probably what I'm going to do is get the actual film of the thylacine in the zoo and see if I can match up the shape and so forth.
Right. And there is I know that there's an Australian scientist who did using the bones and everything like that. They used they made a simulation of the motion as well. It's recent. It's like computer generated. So you could look for that as well, maybe, Phil.
Okay.
And then but it would be so awesome to have that film just to be able to see it, like to do a frame by frame sort of everything. I mean, I don't know who
reconstruction
owns
of
yeah,
some
like
sort,
just a frame by frame just sort of thing where you could actually take a still shot and then maybe get more definition out of it. But I'm with you, Richard. I would say yes. Whether it still exists, I probably say yes. I mean, you know what I mean? I wouldn't be surprised if somebody ever find one. Let's just put it that way. I think there was a thing a couple of years ago where somebody said that they'd, like they had a pretty credible sighting. That was kind of the big thing.
There's loads of sighting reports. There's there was several expeditions launched before it was officially declared extinct that came up with footprints, but they didn't know if they were new or old footprints. There was a pretty famous expedition that came back with pictures, but it was deemed to be a hoax, that they'd used a stuffed one.
Here's the case, though, in that film you just showed. You have to, when you're talking about like Super 8 film, okay, to buy the film, it wasn't cheap, and to have the film developed isn't cheap. And here you've got somebody in this campground. There had to be a reason why they would pick up their camera and film a dog running. And that doesn't make sense. Thylacine, that makes sense.
They'd obviously seen it, because the actual footage is only 11 seconds long. I found it and sent it to you.
Right.
And it starts with the animal already in motion. So they obviously saw it and thought whatever it was important enough to record it on this expensive camera, like you said.
Right.
So I mean, it could be a well orchestrated hoax. It could be a mangy fox. I don't know. But
I really doubt, just based on the motion, I would say not. But I mean, I'm no expert. First of all, I'm no expert on motion, but I do notice certain things. But I would also say, it's kind of like the whole coelacanth thing. How many years was that supposed to be extinct for?
Millions.
64,000 million years or something, and then all
millions
of a sudden, everybody's hauling it off the coast of South Africa or something. So the problem with some of these things are that people may be seeing it and not. I mean, they might not say, okay, that's a weird looking dog. I mean, it's like that. There's some lady in Texas or something that has like what she claims to be, a dead body of a chupacabra, and they did testing on it, and it's some weird hybrid or something. Whether that's a chupacabra or not, I don't know. But it's got weird humps on its back and all kinds of weird things about it. But it's just. But then nobody ever hears about that. You know what I mean? After they do all the testing, it's weird that nobody ever talks about it.
And I don't understand the logic of saying, or at least having experts or scientists say, "Well, it's extinct." That's kind of arrogant when you think that just because you don't see something automatically means it's extinct.
Yeah. Well, that's but scientists do think they're omniscient like that.
Well, I can't do a side-by-side comparison, but if you look at the picture I've just put on, you can see where the stripes are in the video, and you can see where the stripes are on the actual animal. So
yeah, and it is so funny that this was in a zoo, and nobody thought to really do anything about it. You know what I mean? It's just like
conservation didn't really matter back then, did it?
No, but what I'm saying is even to sort of document it, and it seems to me like it's weird that in 1933, this is sitting in the museum or it's in a zoo or something. You can go and see it, and nobody took the scientific curiosity to even do anything about it. Save samples of flesh or blood or whatever. It's just like, okay, well, they're dead now. Screw it.
Well, that brings us to the modern day and the Thylacine Clone Project. It was discovered in the 90s that a farmer had taken several thylacine pups and preserved them. At the moment, modern technology can't do anything about dehydrated DNA, but that's not to say the technology won't be invented in the future to resurrect it via cloning. And they're pretty excited about that. There's a lot of money being thrown at that. And pandas.
Huh.
Yeah.
I'd like to see it.
Yeah, me too. It'd be nice.
Should we trade it like gold dust instead of some scavenger weird animal we don't need anymore?
I've got 2 thylacines.
Whenever he said thylacine, I still didn't know what the hell you were talking about. He was like, what is this Tasmanian tiger? Oh, okay. I know what you're talking about. That's I think a lot of people just associate it with that, but then again,
pretty animal as well.
Most people associate the Tasmanian devil with
Well,
a cartoon.
the Tasmanian devil. Yeah, that's a real thing.
Yeah.
That's the cutest animal on the planet, but they are psychotic. If you watch videos about them, the name is well deserved. They actually got their name because explorers could hear them screaming at night and were convinced there was a devil in the woods.
Yeah,
Hey, Richard.
I've seen the
Yeah.
productions.
Is thylacine considered a canine or a feline?
It's a marsupial.
Okay. Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's weird. It's like a kangaroo, and the fact that you give birth and it crawls up into your
Yeah.
in your pouch or whatever.
It's unique because it was one of very few marsupials that both males and females had pouches.
Uh-huh.
So
Very unique animal, no matter how you look at it. I think that's why people like it.
Not quite as unique as the duck-billed platypus, but it's
True.
unique.
they reckon that the Australian Aborigines reckon that the universe was drawn by the creator. He sat down with a bit of charcoal and drew every animal, and then it became in existence. And it's widely accepted that he must have sneezed or something when he was trying to draw a duck, and that's where the duck-billed platypus comes from.
That's another thing. It's a
Sorry.
And what's another interesting thing about Aboriginal people is that they don't see ley lines as we describe it. I've met people that said they can see ley lines, but they hear it. And they can travel very, very long distances and sort of show up in a certain place at the same time just by hearing the hum of the land. I always find that interesting because of the vibrationary states of things.
When I was composing that music, I had gone back to find out about maybe the spirituality of the Aborigine, and their connection with Ayers Rock, Uluru. So, and it was a dream. The life was in a dream world, or they were in a dream world, and the real life was beyond them into another realm. So when you go into a meditative state, what you're traveling into is what is real rather than what is not.
It's a reverse. A lot of cultures believe in that sort of a reverse thing that like now we're in a dream, but when we go to sleep at night and dream, that's the real world.
And you're actually looking through a window at what is real. Yeah.
Okay, now you made me think of is this the real world or just fantasy?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
We want to be careful how far down that simulation theory road you go.
No, I'm not going there. I'm just saying that's what they believe in. It doesn't mean you have to believe in it.
It's a spiritual thing, not a scientific thing.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's belief, not fact.
So that's the thylacine, a poor animal that was wiped out within 100 or so years of us discovering it. So good on us. Seriously, we did good. Chubbs, what do you want to talk about next week?
I didn't know I was up to bat.
You're up to bat.
I'd have to think about it for a minute and let y'all know.
All right, then. Phil, what would you like to talk about?
Oh, gee, and I had something prepared yesterday, and now I don't remember what it was.
All right, I did put you on the spot. I'm sorry about that. That's on me, guys. But so next week we'll be talking about something from Phil.
It'll be more along the lines of cryptids.
Sweet.
Oh, you know what, Phil, would be a good thing. I don't know if you've ever heard of this sort of what's that called now? Damn it.
Yeah, you're not helping, Kevin.
Yeah, no, but I was just thinking. No, it was a weird photo of a thing that was taken in I know what it's called, the Cadborosaurus. The Cadborosaurus.
Oh, yes, we have one here. We had baby Cadborosauruses here. Yeah.
Did you?
Well, yeah, one was washed up on the beach.
Oh, okay. That's an interesting story that most people have never heard of. I heard about it. Well, that would be a good topic.
Oh, I'm all in with that one. I know something about that.
Okay.
So I'd like to talk about that. Or
why not? Let's do it.
So, all right, then the Chabosaurus and
I got one. Would y'all be interested in a sea monster story? We have a lake here that has its own kind of Nessie type story. We haven't done one anything like that in a while.
Yeah, that
That's
would
Cool.
that's
that would
right in
actually-
line.
yeah, that would actually be like a nautical sea monster story for next week.
All right, then. Cadborosaurus and the Lassie,
There we go.
I'll get the name for you.
the Louisiana Nest Monster.
I know the name of it. It's called Chubbs de Leon.
Yeah.
Chubbs de Leon.
I know we're not supposed to swear on this show, but go fuck yourself, Jane. All right? That'll
I'll tell
wrap
you
us
what.
up. All right.
Oh, I
sorry.
was just gonna say I'll leave you with this. The lake is called Lake Maurepas. So
The
So
Very-
it's the
Lake
like Maurepas
Monster.
there you go.
Yeah, nice.
or
Good
Murray for short.
time. Murray. No, I'm not talking about Champ. I consider Champ to be hilarious, Jet Sex. All right. We are moving on. That'll wrap us up for this week. We will return next week, despite the hopes of many, and hopefully with Niki. So, good night from all of us here at the Squatchable podcast. Look out for that cool Thylacine breakdown coming out from Phil. Go to Bigfoot with Keith and Colin. The intro may change, but the outro remains the same.
We all leave the same way.
We do. Yeah, I like that one. That's good. All right then, Disco Suits.